let's talk about first fruits, and I'm going to define this quickly and give a practical example before we close off. In ancient Israel, which was an agrarian-based economy, an agriculturally based economy, primarily given to farming, produce and livestock, the first fruit represented the first ripened harvest in a crop, or the first offspring from the animals that were produced. So in a typical farming scenario, a farmer would have a field, let's say of wheat, and as the first ripened fruit manifested, that farmer would harvest it but not consume it. He would go to the high priest and offer that to the Lord, giving it to the high priest as a representation of God in his spiritual world. And he would offer this totally to him. Whatever came in first was given to the high priest as an offering in honor of the Lord and in gratitude of the Lord himself. The same applied to the firstborn of animals. Whatever came in first, it was given holistically, not touched, to the high priest as an expression of gratitude and honor to the Lord, in acknowledgement of the fact that the entire productivity, the whole realm of harvest, was God's blessing, God's determination. And without God, there would be no harvest. It was also given in anticipation of a coming and a more complete or full harvest. Now, Israel celebrated 7 feasts. And you will see the graphic on your screen in the table. There were 7 feasts celebrated in 3 months. You see the first column, the first month, the third month, and the 7th month. You can see the 7 feasts listed in the second column. But those feasts were broadly categorized into 3 general descriptors. That being, in the first month, the feast of Passover, in which you will see in the last column, you will have a barley crop manifest. In the third month, in the feast of Pentecost, the wheat crop, and in the 7th month, the feast of tabernacles, oil and wine. So in the feast of Passover, farmers would take a sheaf, the first ripe sheaf, and would go to the priest to offer it. The priest would stand in his house and wave this sheaf before the Lord as an offering, signifying that this is the Lord's offering and that the offerer is giving it in honor of the Lord, but also in anticipation of a future and more fuller harvest to come. So it was given at the feast of the feast of the sheaf of first fruits, which was the third feast in the Passover celebrations, in anticipation that 50 days later, at the feast of Pentecost, there would even be a perpetual harvest of wheat in the third month. There too, first fruits were offered to the priest in anticipation that in the 7th month at Tabernacles, our oil and our wine, our vintage harvest, would come to full blossom. I want to read to you Exodus 23 to indicate to you how that 3 times a year, corresponding with the 3 feasts, God expected Israel to come and offer these first fruits together with tithes and offerings to the Lord. 3 times a year, Exodus 23:14. 3 times a year you shall celebrate to me a feast. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, that's Passover. For 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread as I commanded you, and as I, at the appointed time, in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. Verse 16, also you shall observe the feast of harvest. That's the feast of Pentecost. Of the first fruits of your labors, for what you sow in the field. Also the feast of the ingathering, which is the 7th month feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, at the end of the year when you gather your fruit of the labors from the field. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord. Verse 19, you shall bring the choice first fruits of your soil into the house of the Lord your God, and you are not to boil a young goat in the milk of its mother. What would be a modern day contemporary application of the first fruit principle? If you were a farmer in Israel, it would be easy. Whatever came in first, offer that to the Lord. In all the feasts, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 7th month feast, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. As Israel moved from an agrarian-based economy into a more vocational, commercial type setup, a monetary-based economy where people would work for an employer and be remunerated in time. The rabbis in Jesus' day were often asked what portion of a field constituted first fruits, because they wanted to obey the principle, but needed to be accurate in assessing what levels of their income would constitute a first fruit offering. So the rabbis said this, when they historically appraised what farmers would give as first fruits in reference to a percentage or an allotment or portion of the totality of a field, they said anywhere from between 1/40th and 1/60th of the total produce of the field annually generally constituted what farmers in their day would have offered as a first fruit offering. Obviously 1/40th is greater than 1/60th, and they also then said if you offer the greater, your eye will be full of light, and lesser light if you offered the lesser, 1/60th. So today, in today's modern world, most people work and earn a salary. Some are remunerated weekly, others are remunerated monthly. Rarely are people remunerated daily. So if I say to you, whatever comes in first, offer that to the Lord. We would have different amounts if people only looked at the methodology by which they are remunerated. Because the person that is remunerated daily would give the first day. The person that is remunerated weekly will give the first week, monthly, and so forth. So the rabbis give us some indication as to wisdom that should persist when determining your first fruit. We suggest that as a starting point, one should give a minimum of the first week's income to the Lord as a first fruit. A first week's income is 1 week. There are 52 weeks in a year. So 1/52 would more or less approximate to at least 2% of one's total annual gross earnings. Or if you are remunerated monthly, would at least equate to the first week's income, or a quarter of your salary, or 25% of your salary. Now that is a starting point. I have started this journey, and presently we are offering a full month's salary as our first fruit offering in a particular calendar year. Please remember this. It's in a particular calendar year. In a particular calendar year of 52 weeks, the first week's offering in a particular first month it will be, if you are salaried, 25% of your salary in that first month as a first fruit given to the Lord. In subsequent months, you could just then give tithes and offerings. In next week, I will give you more practical examples of how this should be administrated. Let me just conclude by saying this. Do not be governed by a calculator when determining your first fruits. Be governed by your heart disposition. Whatever comes in first, yes, offer that to the Lord. Do not have a frugal mindset or stingy disposition or a withholding spirit when functioning or determining one's first fruit offering. The measure of light in your eye must determine the measure of revelation. As your faith grows, as your obedience level grows, as the quality of illumination in your spirit grows, so too will the degree of your offering of the first fruits grow in ways that will literally amaze you.